delighted to say we have Hugo Stevenson from the Priscilla Bacon Hospice, and he's going to give a short presentation. This is one of my charities for the year. So Hugo, over to you, my love. Do you know how to turn the That's it.
Good evening. So my name is Hugo Stevenson and I'm Head of Operations and Fundraising for the Priscilla Bacon Hospice charity. We are very grateful to Councillor Grove-Jones for electing our charity as one of her charities of the year and for the opportunity to talk to you today about the Priscilla Bacon Hospice charity and our appeal. A hospice exists to improve the lives of people who have life-limiting or terminal illnesses, helping them to live as actively as they can to the end of their lives, however long that may be. A hospice not only takes care of people's physical needs, but looks after their emotional, spiritual, and social needs as well. Carers, family members, close friends are all supported at hospices, both during a person's illness and during bereavement. Many of you will have heard of Priscilla Bacon Lodge at the Coleman Hospital on Unthank Road in Norwich. It provides specialist palliative care for Norfolk and Waveney and was built in 1979 following a county-wide appeal led by Priscilla, Lady Bacon. Those who've had a friend, a colleague, or a loved one who have received hospice care or spent their final days at Priscilla Bacon Lodge will know the benefit of hospices and the value and the dedication of the staff and volunteers. When Priscilla Bacon Lodge opened, it was one of the first hospices in the UK and was the first in East Anglia. Since then, the population of Norfolk and Waveney has grown by over 220,000 people, and there are now just over 1 million people across Norfolk and Waveney. Priscilla Bacon Lodge, however, has just 16 specialist inpatient beds, although it does support an average of a further 10,000 patients every year in the wider community. Despite the excellent work of Priscilla Bacon Lodge and other end-of-life services, the percentage of the population of Norfolk and Waveney able to receive any specialist end-of-life care, whether in a hospice or at home, is amongst the lowest in England. And it's estimated that 70% of the deaths in our county need some form of palliative care. We have the lowest number of hospice deaths in the UK and a significantly higher proportion of care home deaths than the national average. I've mentioned that the population of Norfolk and Waveney is increasing. We're also living longer, and as a consequence of that, have ever more complex care needs. In the last 10 years, the number of over 65s has increased dramatically. And this statistic is particularly relevant to us in Norfolk, as nearly a quarter of our county is aged 65 and over. And this number is due to increase to getting on for a third of the population of Norfolk in the next 10 years. The limitations of the existing Priscilla Bacon Lodge were recognised nearly 20 years ago, and it's taken significant efforts by Susan Bacon, who is the current Lady Bacon and daughter-in-law of Priscilla, to create the correct position for the new hospice to be developed. Priscilla Bacon Hospice is a new charity which we launched in March 2019 and was charged with raising £12.5 million to build a bigger, better hospice with room to expand, into which the current Priscilla Bacon Lodge will be moved. The image you see on the screen is an artist's impression of the new facility. And the amazing news is not only have we secured the land and planning permission, but we've started to build, and we're making excellent progress on raising the £12.5 million necessary to complete the project. Have the next slide, please. The Priscilla Bacon Hospice charity will provide Norfolk and Waveney with a new facility on land adjacent to the Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital. This location means we'll be able to work with the university to help train medical students within the specialism of palliative care. We've already established a relationship with the Big C charity, and they will help deliver education within the facility. The University of East Anglia is already a centre of excellence for research, so it's our aspiration for the new Priscilla Bacon Lodge to play a key role delivering clinical research projects and trials within the environment of the Norwich Research Park. This means that we'll be not only providing care for the immediate needs of the county, but also looking to the future with new models of care. Delivering care, training, and research on a single site will make this new facility unique. Next slide, please. Our new hospice will be set in an 8-acre environment, which will allow a more spacious facility to flourish. There'll be significantly more parking than the Coleman Road site and much more effective transport links for buses and cycle paths. Next slide, please. There is capacity for 24 inpatient beds. Each of the single bedrooms, which you see towards the right of the screen, has a private garden into which patients can be wheeled in their beds. There's a wellbeing centre and a family dining room, which will give the opportunity for patients and their families to still sit and eat together. A larger day unit will also enable patients to visit the facility for their therapy and classes and other necessities. Next slide, please. The design of the new hospice has included learnings from the last 2 hospices built in East Anglia, the Arthur Rank in Cambridge and Fairhavens Hospice in Essex. We've had input from the medical staff at the current lodge, along with volunteer opinions and family members to make sure we're building something of optimal design. Revisions were made during the COVID pandemic due to the changing infection control measures, and we wanted to ensure that our facility was fit for the future. Next slide, please. This is an artist's impression of the entrance of the new hospice. It was our firm intention to create a building that seemed appropriate in the Norfolk landscape, and the inspiration was a traditional Norfolk barn with Norfolk red bricks that have a variation in their tone and finish, and red clay pan tiles, along with exposed oak beams. The building was designed so it did not look like a medical facility, but looks homely and welcoming, with surrounding gardens in a wider wooded landscape. Next slide, please. This is an artist's impression of the Courtyard Garden, which will be visible from the day unit, the inpatient unit, and the dining room, which is straight ahead. And you can see a wall of glass to allow the light and landscape to enter the building. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier that we've commenced the build, and we had a wonderful groundbreaking ceremony in February with Robert Carter, chairman of the Priscilla Bacon Hospice charity, and our patron, Lady Bacon, using the ceremonial spade to break ground on the site. Next slide, please. The drone shot indicates the scale of the site, and since it was taken in March, there's been a great deal of progress. The steel frame has been constructed for the 2-story section, and at the left-hand side, the entrance can be seen, and the far right-hand side, the inpatient unit is visible. Here's another view of the steel frame, and the area to the right-hand side will be the Courtyard Garden that you saw in the artist's impression. This is the view across the courtyard, standing within the inpatient unit. The fall of the land on the site and the established tree line will help provide wonderful screening, so the hospital is not visible from the inpatient unit, and there will be a natural view and the landscape visible from within the facility. This is progress on the inpatient unit, and there were 110 tons of concrete poured to create the floor slab upon which the block work of the internal walls to form the single bedrooms in the unit. You can clearly see the wide doorways which allow the beds to be passed out into the areas that will be the individual gardens. The interaction between inside and outside the building and the landscape has been considered throughout the project. We're so lucky here in Norfolk to have nature on our doorstep, and the gardens and the wider landscape have been carefully planned to ensure that the hospice feels at one with the environment. The sights and the smells of the garden are so important to patients, and we want to give patients the opportunity to feel sunshine on their skin and breathe fresh air. Every time I visit the site, I feel so inspired that this long-held dream of this vital new building is now becoming a reality. We've already raised over 10.3 million of our 12.5 million target. So we only need to raise another 2.2 million to complete the project. Our rallying call this year is 2.2 for 2022, as we ask the support of the wider community to help us reach our fundraising total. We are a very small fundraising team and proud to deliver 93 pence in every pound raised into the campaign, which is significantly higher than much larger charities. So please spread the word of our appeal. Please keep visiting our charity shops. Please keep donating so that we complete the new hospice. And our renewed thanks to Councillor Grove-Jones for supporting our appeal. Once established, the new Priscilla Bacon Lodge will help more people choose where they wish to receive the best possible end-of-life care and access the specific services they require when they need them. Norfolk has a proud history of fundraising for hospices, which started with Priscilla Bacon Lodge. And by supporting our campaign, you will help put Norfolk back at the forefront of the hospice movement and help to provide Norfolk with the end-of-life care it so desperately deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugo, for that talk and the slides. I found that very interesting. And I wish you every luck, success, and we will do our best to help raise funds for you. If you'd like to stay, you're very welcome, but otherwise you are very welcome to
I will
to leave.
Politely decline and go and spend the evening with my children. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that was very enlightening, I must say. Now we go back to the agenda. Item 2, apologies for absence.
I've received apologies from councillors Brown, Heinrich, Mancini Boyle, Perry Warnes, Punchard, Stockton and Toy.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman. I'm also stating that Andreas Yassimi has sent in his apologies as well.
Oh, and Councillor Butikova has also sent his apologies. We now go to confirm the minutes of the annual meeting of the council held on the 18th of May. I have no intention of going through this page by page. I'm assuming, I hope correctly, that you've all gone through this. And are there any corrections that you wish to make to the minutes? No, nothing at all. Well, then can I have a proposer to accept the minutes as they stand? Councillor Kershaw, and seconder? Councillor Shires. Thank you. Could we all now raise our hands? Unanimous. This one, are you abstaining? Right, okay, fine. So that's okay. I don't believe there are any items of urgent business, Emma. No. Any declarations of interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary, from our members to this evening? Nope. Chairman's communications. Well, my goodness me. Trust me to get Jubilee year. But it's been lovely. I've had some really nice visits. And I think we've got some slides, not necessarily of me, you'll be pleased to know, but where I have been visiting. So can we go through to number 1, please?
Sorry, Paul, I'm just having some issues with the projector now. Bear with me.
Hang around. We are serving cocoa about 10 o'clock. Is that all right? Sorry. I thought I had such a loud voice, most of you could hear me anyway. After the last meeting on the Thursday, I went to Jarrold's in Norwich for the High Sheriff's presentation about or launching his Nourishing Norfolk charity, which is actually a very good thing to do because it's taking the stigma out of going to the food bank, setting up community shops where people can go and collect food and buy food at a reduced price. That was interesting. The only thing was nowhere to sit. But I managed to get a chair because 1.5 hours standing was not quite what I wanted. But it was extremely nice, and there was a little bit of Prosecco. Then I went to a picnic at South Retz and Antingham Primary School. That was lovely. The children, they were from 3 and 4 up to 11, and they sang God Save the Queen. And then 3 of them had written a poem, which was lovely. And they were having a picnic. It was lovely. Well, we enjoyed ourselves, didn't we? Thoroughly enjoyed. And then we had a look around the school. It was very nice. Only 62 pupils, which is extraordinary. Then Virginia and I also went to Shrek, the performance at the Chroma Pier, which was excellent. My family went on the Monday. My grandchildren were going potty, dancing around. There we are, Shrek. And wonderful, the voices of these amateurs were so good. So that was thoroughly pleasant. Then what's the next one on? Because I don't know if I've got these in order. Holt, yes. There I am, splendid in green jacket. And Lady Dannant is there in the red dress. And we were unveiling the commemorative plaques, tablets for the Platinum Jubilee. Look at that cake. I never got a piece of it. I don't know. But that was lovely. And there was Prosecco there as well. It just makes up a little bit. Next one. Oh, you've done it. Yes, this was Sarah. Sarah, do you want to say anything? Come on.
I can do it. This was the inauguration of the Mayoress of King's Lynn, and also a celebration, a service of celebration for the Queen's Jubilee. And it was a very, very nice evening, lovely service, and was very well attended.
Thank you. This was a great Yarmouth Minster. This was the celebration of the Jubilee. It was freezing cold in the Minster. They say that it's wonderful when it's very, very warm. Everybody goes into the Minster to cool down, but it's so cold, poor things, that in the winter the choir had to take hot water bottles. I thought you'd just like to know that little side, but it was very, very nice. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Then I went to Norwich Cathedral. This was actually, I think, for the annual mayoral procession. So they processed through the streets. I didn't, because I'm not really into that. I just went straight to the cathedral, which is lovely. The choir was lovely. So we thoroughly enjoyed that. Next one. The VE Day 75th, well, you can read this, that was on Sunday, and the poppies were presented to the wonderful volunteers who made the poppies and who've been selling them, etc. And several of us in the members have received the poppies, and I have offered my poppies to the council or to Stalham, whoever wants them, because they're not, I didn't do anything. They were given to me as the chair, so I don't feel I should keep them, but they're beautiful. I will bring them in and show you. I also went to, have I missed anything out? Yes, I went to Stalham for the commemoration of the sinking of the Argent, and one of our residents was killed, and there was a commemoration service for those who died during the Falkland War. I think that was it. And Sarah, did you went somewhere else? Yes. Attended.
So I also went to Wells Community Hospital for a planting Jubilee tree for the Queen's Canopy project, attended by a group of young people from Wells School, who are an absolute credit. I think the headmaster has done a superb job with them. They were really nice young people. It's a good event.
That's been quite a busy month. Right, we now swiftly pass on to leaders' announcements. Tim.
Thank you. This year marks 27 years since the genocide at Srebrenica in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in which over 8,000 Bosnian Muslim men and boys were systematically murdered in what became described by the United Nations as the worst crime on European soil since the Second World War. On the 11th of July, the official date of remembrance each year, we honour the victims and survivors of genocide and pledge ourselves to create a better, stronger and more cohesive society in the United Kingdom. The lessons we learn from Srebrenica are that hatred and intolerance can flourish if left unchallenged, and why we must challenge intolerance at every turn. So we join many other authorities in marking this occasion during a full council meeting in me making such a statement. On living costs, perhaps the biggest challenge faced by our residents at this time, we have of course another item on the agenda this evening, given the fuel costs being faced by us all, but of course our staff, and we have a recommendation. We had the cabinet meeting where we agreed the 2 discretionary hardship funds. I think this again shows the organisation's values, but also the proficiency of our staff once again in having turned their attention to these matters. And as you may have seen in the newspaper this month, we do have the best rebate performance in the county in delivering the rebate to residents, which of course may not be a surprise given the wonderful work already done by that team. Pauline and myself, of course, attended the launch of the Norfolk Community Foundation Nourishing Norfolk proposals, a wonderful event. And I would also like to take the opportunity to thank those of you in this room who are involved with initiatives in their own localities and towns and villages. And I would also like to commend staff members who are working to reduce homelessness and rough sleeping. I was lucky enough to attend another meeting of the multi-agency discussion group on rough sleeping in the district, and of course this time of year when we do see some growth in rough sleeping numbers, and again very grateful to the staff members working in this area. Moving on, I thank our communications team to whom congratulations I think are due for producing the new edition of the Outlook magazine with contributions from across the council. The results of this work clearly haven't been seen yet, but they will be hitting doormats shortly. And it's a very good achievement, I think, for the council and that team. Among the correspondence received from members of the council since the last meeting, I noted some concerns about the sustainability of our leisure centres, given the current costs of running such facilities and, of course, energy costs. I most certainly recognise the reasons behind these questions, as we have seen some leisure centres elsewhere in the country closed due to those additional energy costs. And I think we are in a more resilient position, and clearly, the facilities we have are very modern and efficient in terms of the reef, but relatively modern in other cases, to the extent that this is not a concern for me, and I hope it isn't a concern for you. I also wanted to reflect on the many welcome initiatives across the district, some of which you would have been involved in, to commemorate the Jubilee across the district. Both of our North Norfolk MPs have now indicated their agreement with our levelling up bids, and I thank staff who are working against the clock to progress our applications on top of their other duties. And I believe the leaders of the other groups would echo that. Two more operational matters, really. We will be holding an extraordinary cabinet meeting on the afternoon of 4th of July, so that the details of both bids can be shared and discussed by members before the submission, which I believe is on the 6th of July. That, of course, doesn't preclude any further consultation with the two communities on the bids, but it will also be a chance to discuss the ongoing costs in respect to the swimming pool and opportunities for savings in respect of the Cromer bid. Lastly, I should say I do intend to be largely, but not exclusively, only working half days from next week ahead of my imminent paternity leave, during which time responsibilities will, of course, be delegated to Eric and other cabinet members in the event of his own absence. That's all I wish to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And we wish you every luck, you and your partner, for a very speedy and successful event. And I absolutely enhance speedy because the best. So, now, number 8, public questions and statements. I don't believe we have any. Portfolio reports. Now, will you please remember that this is restricted 30 minutes, which is time. And I'm going to say that we have seen all the portfolio presentations from the cabinet members. Have they anything else to add? Yes, Councillor Seward. Could you put your microphone on, please?
On the finance and resources report on page 50, a figure is given for council tax collection in 2021-22 of 98.1%. To give some context, that places the council in the top 15% nationally of councils. And in the case of non-domestic rates, a figure of 99.24% is given. That means that this council nationally is the 3rd top. So I thought members might just appreciate that context.
Thank you, Eric. Anybody else from Cabinet wish to say something? Yes. Councillor Fredericks.
Thank you very much, Chairman. On the discretionary hardship support grant, I would like to congratulate Trudy and Karen and People Services for pulling this grant together. It says that it needs to be ratified. It doesn't. We actually voted on this at Cabinet, and also for the energy rebate discretionary scheme as well. That was voted on at Cabinet. It doesn't need to be ratified here. Thank you. It's a mistake.
Anybody else wish to speak? Cabinet? No, Cabinet's portfolio at the moment.
No, not hold on. I just want to ask a question of one, but when you're ready.
Just let me
Thank you.
Because you'll throw me, you know what it's like, John. So no more portfolio holders. No, now I'm opening up to the members. One question from each of you. There's only 30 minutes for questions. And second questions will be taken in the order that they are received. So John, you're first.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Councillor Seward on page 49 under the assets. First of all, I'd like to say this is a classic example, unfortunately, of several times that I have asked that ward members are to be kept up to date on issues in their ward. And at yesterday's Fakenham Town Council meeting, I was actually asked about this item and I was unable to give any explanation about what it was about. And what it says in the report is Fakenham Connect lease to physio. On page 49. I have no idea what that's about. Thank you.
Eric, do you wish to reply?
Well, can I first of all thank Councillor Rest for raising this with me. I also apologise that local members were not informed. I normally ask when I see these things that they are. Certainly the case when we concluded the sale on Brightwell Street in Walsingham. I will go back to the officers and ask for a proper response to be given to Councillor Rest and all local members in Fakenham.
Can I ask you to just bend your microphone slightly more towards you, because you speak quite softly, unlike me. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My question is this. We have all seen the brief and almost sterile email announcement by the Chief Executive of the recent no-notice resignation of the Director of Resources. What more can the leader add to explain why that happened the way it did, and whether there were any connections to the many serious criticisms of North Norfolk District Council and the notorious events of May to December 2019 made by Ernst & Young in their external audit annual report for 1920?
So
Cara would like to make a comment there.
I just want to check. The question may need to be rejected unless you're able to answer it without the disclosure of confidential or exempt information.
thank you, Cara. I simply wish to say, question concerns matters about staffing, past or present, and there's no precedent for discussing such matters at any local authority, any such public body in such a meeting session, so it would not be appropriate to do so. Thank you.
Councillor Cushing.
Well, I'll have another go. Can the leader tell us to what extent he was involved in the discussions leading to the no-notice resignation of the Director of Resources, and whether there was any extraordinary departure deal done to enable the departure to happen, and whether he had any part in agreeing that deal? So the three parts to the question: was he involved in the discussions? Was an extraordinary departure deal done, and did he agree such a deal?
Sorry, Chris, I'm going to have to pass back to Cara because this is
My advice is the same as previously. Unless you're able to answer that question without disclosure of confidential or exempt information, then that question may need to be rejected.
Thank you. I simply refer back to my previous answer.
Yolanda.
It's Yolanda.
Yolanda. Sorry.
Yes, actually, my question also refers to the departure of the director. So if I'm permitted to have a go, I'm happy to ask that if the monitoring officer would like to reject that question. Either way, I just would like to know if first of all, if I can ask
that. I don't know exactly what your question is going to be, but if it involves a response where the leader or
that's okay, I'll let that go. If you decide it's not appropriate, then we take it from there.
Do you need to ask the
leader then regarding the departure of the Director of Resources?
So my advice is the same, that if the response requires the disclosure of confidential or exempt information, then that question would need to be rejected.
I would say it's rather general.
What is your question?
Will the residents of North Norfolk ever be told the content of the extraordinary departure deal? If not specifics, I'm not asking for specifics. Then what it comprised of, like, was there sum of money, compensation, reference for future employer, or closure of any disciplinary action?
I again refer back to my previous answer concerning staff past and present, and that there is no precedent for discussing these matters at any other local authority, certainly not here, and it would not be appropriate to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Will councillors, who all have a responsibility for the governance of the council, be told the content of the extraordinary departure deal? And if it is a confidential agreement, will there be a provision for councillors to be told confidentially?
Well, I think you've all shared notes, haven't you? I have to answer the question the same way, and I refer back to my previous answer. Thank you.
I think we're getting the gist of this so far. Councillor Penfold, please.
Chair, could I just ask for a point of information or order on that? The leader has declined to answer a range of questions, some of which didn't actually ask for any confidential information to be disclosed in relation to the compromise agreement that was no doubt drawn up for the departure of the officer that we're talking about. Can he not answer whether he was involved or not? That can't be confidential, surely. Not asking for the specifics, we're just asking for where he was in the process of deciding that departure. That's a point of information or order. That's a question. Could that be answered, please?
I think we have to go back to our legal advisor here. So, Cara?
Well, I think firstly, if Councillor Hayman wishes to ask a question, I think there was another member before Councillor Hayman. We're doing it in order.
We've got three others actually before Councillor.
I wasn't asking a question. It was a point of order or information about the ability to duck a question. And is that within our protocol for answering questions at this forum? Because if it is, it isn't, then actually it makes a mockery of the scrutiny of the democracy of this institution.
If you're saying it's a point of order, where in the Constitution or under legislation do you consider that the matter hasn't been dealt with correctly?
Well, I'd rather hope that you'd be able to answer that question because I'm obviously not conversant and not paid to understand the legal niceties of our constitution as it operates every day. But I would have thought there was some provision within that for the ability to ask a question that doesn't require and doesn't reveal anything confidential of a financial or employment matter. Merely, was he involved and was he present? It's a simple question.
It's my understanding that if a member wishes to make a point of order at council, they need to refer to the specific provision in the Constitution which they consider hasn't been adhered to, or which provision under the legislation they consider is being breached. So if you're able to do that, then I will consider that.
Councillor Hayman, we can give you a written answer to your question if you or to your point of order, if you so wish.
I'd certainly like that.
Right,
and maybe I was actually going to call for an adjournment so that we can actually see the Constitution, but actually I think that's probably not a good idea.
No, I don't think that's a good idea at all. And I think as we've said, if we can give you a written answer, which I think is quite sensible. Right. Now, can I get back to the list? Because you're using up the 30 minutes. Councillor Penfold.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. It was a question from Councillor Hayman. He just said it's a simple question. I'm answering here, asking. So thanks for jumping in and cutting my question. It's kind of behaviour I'm getting used to from Councillor Hayman, to be honest. Page 35, moving on. Councillor Gay, portfolio and the report for culture. Thank you for this report. Just to say, an invitation really to members. It talks here about the North Horsham Street Feast, which was highly successful back in May. We've got a second one coming up on the 2nd of July from 12 p.m. until 8 p.m. in the marketplace. And I'd just like to invite members to that, to encourage them to attend a great event and to eat as much as possible. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzpatrick, Tom.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm not going to waste the opportunity to ask a question by asking one of the leader, as he sidestepped and, to my mind, betrayed the virtues of the Northern Principle and the need to compliance and practice, particularly as this council's given extra training for councillors. And I'm not quite sure how that's complied with in that rather appalling way. I'll defer to the monitoring officer, but actually there are questions asked that were separate from any disclosure. So I'm not going to waste my time with the leader. So I'll ask Councillor Kershaw. In my pigeonhole today was this, same as everyone else that gathers pigeonhole, about the benefits of Equinor. And as far as I'm concerned, it rather rubs salt in the wound as a local member where over 100 jobs were lost, partly because of the inaction of this council, hearing about the new UK hub and operations centre being established in Great Yarmouth and all the opportunities for jobs. I think that being in the pigeonholes is shocking. There's a few crumbs on the rich man's table. That's the rich man being the borough of Great Yarmouth, and good luck to them because they fought for those jobs. And I know all about the consolidation sector, but well-paid jobs have been lost in this district, and actually nothing's turned up to replace them. There are a few promises, but what I'm concerned about is the big impact on the wider local economy in my ward and the wards round about, the loss of spending in hospitality, the loss of good jobs and long-term jobs for young people. And what's one of the compensations for that? Oh, the wider disruption as they churn yet another couple of cable routes through North Norfolk. I've asked before, I've been given some fairly sort of push me off replies, but exactly what has been done to replace those over 100 well-paid jobs in the vacant Walsingham and vacant area of North Norfolk. And I know there are a few things for one of the air bases, but actually definite jobs. What definite jobs are on hand to replace those? Because nothing has been done. And I think putting this in pigeonholes is actually, quite frankly, shameful.
Thank you for your essay.
All right, I would actually, on a point of order, I asked a perfectly polite question. I didn't get an essay. An essay is written. Could I just have a polite answer to the question? Thank you.
Of course, Councillor Fitzpatrick. As you're fully aware, quite a few of the jobs moved years ago. They haven't all gone in the last year. The folly of building such a place with a harbour that only has 3 hours high water when an industry is growing is plain to see. The fact that this area has moved to Great Yarmouth is because of the way that the larger fields are being serviced by hotel ships. And I think Councillor Fitzpatrick knows that full well. He also is aware that I have visited Walsingham on several occasions with the Chief Executive, and there has been no further interest in the building, which is not really a great surprise seeing how large it is. And there are, as you know, we did contact you as soon as we heard about the interest in providing high quality jobs in the west of the building, or the potential. You were the first to know with the local member. Thank you.
Sorry, there are no jobs, there have been no jobs notified to me in my ward as a local member. Thank you.
Councillor Victor Fitzpatrick. Vincent, I do beg pardon, Vincent.
No problem, no problem, Madam Chairman. I've got a question for the Cabinet Member for Cost. On page 21 of her report, she refers to suspension of an ongoing demolition. So what I'd like to understand and maybe get some assurances that some risk assessment has been carried out so that there's no current risk to the public, and that this partially demolished building will be monitored and safeguarding steps will be taken to ensure no danger to the public as this lies in a semi-demolished state. And this is particularly important given that the holiday season is coming up with visitors who are strangers to the area with kids and such like. So I'm just really concerned about the public safety of this suspended demolition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I can assure you that it will be demolished in due course very safely. It has, however, been delayed due to the fact that there are sand martins nesting under the cliff, and we have had to suspend all works until the sand martins have flown, which we expect them to be later on in the autumn. The site, as I observed, when did I go? Last Friday week. Have you been to have a look at it?
No, I haven't. Because
it's an assumption then. It's perfectly.
Sorry,
it is screened.
Point of order, Madam Chairman. You know, so I asked for an answer, not to be interrogated. So I don't think it is reasonable for the portfolio member to actually start asking questions of me to answer her question, which I placed to her. And it was a perfectly reasonable question about public safety. And I think trying to take a snipe is out of order.
Okay, right. Well, we won't fall into that trap, will we? If you had been a member of this council 12 years ago when we demolished 11 houses in Haysborough, you will have been aware that the works were done with full health and safety checks all the way through. This continued. Can you not interrupt, please? This will continue and it will be observed properly, health and safety right the way through. We have a very, very good record. We have had no health and safety incidents, and we don't expect to.
With all due respect, Madam Chairman, that wasn't an answer to my question. What happened 12 years ago doesn't answer my question, or 11 years ago, sorry. It doesn't answer my question. My question was, what steps to protect public safety have been put in place for this case? So it's clear that the portfolio holder doesn't know, and if I would actually accept a written answer if she wants to go away and check. Thank you.
I think that probably. I don't need to go away and check. Sure? It is completely fenced in, and coastal representatives but visit on frequent occasions to make sure it's safe.
Thank you. Actually, I think a visit might be in order for yourself, Vincent, just to go and have a look and see what's going on. I mean, to be honest.
A point of order, actually, if the portfolio holder had answered the question, this is a disgraceful, an absolutely disgraceful use of members' question time to portfolio holders. It's a disgrace. Nolan principles, they don't seem to apply here. I think it's absolutely disgraceful.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to address Lucy Shires, please. And before I start with this, I realised there was a meeting held or to be held this week. Something went wrong, and we cross-communicated or didn't communicate for whatever reason. I have put a request through to reaffirm that meeting. However, I am in the situation of having to read you an email that I have received yesterday, sorry, I'll get it right. And it says as follows. To Mr. M. Pearce, local councillor, Roughton Ward, NNDC, on the 13th of June, 2022, I had the need to ring and contact someone at NNDC for a matter of which will remain private. However, the call was of a finance nature, which therefore required myself that is my complainant, speaking to someone in that department. After being asked numerous questions and being instructed to push buttons 1 and buttons 2 too many times, I finally reached the right department. This took some 10 to 15 minutes at least. Imagine my frustration at being told that there was a very long queue and that I would have to wait for a long time for an answer. After a minimum of another 15 minutes, I was advised that it would be still some considerable time before I could speak to somebody, and that it would be better if I was to ring back tomorrow. Therefore, my question to you, Mr. Pearce, as a councillor is as follows. Could you please ask at the nearest opportunity, when is NNDC going to provide an efficient and public caring service for us who are unable to have our queries and questions answered by internet? Your telephone system is always the first part and port of call and is a signpost of focus and impression that lasts forever. The fact that everybody has to wait for an answer for a considerable amount of time after eventually getting through is literally quite appalling. And to eventually get to the right person is time wasting, life sapping and frustrating to the point that I know many people like me give up. Pensioners especially need more care and concern and personal contact, is as many of us do not have internet access, confidence or connection and cannot even make an appointment. When is the current administration going to wake up and provide a decent and accountable service to us all instead of this hugely expensive part working system that shows blatant non-public facing concern for us, yet is very quick and punctual in raising council tax and passing down increases that only provide less of a service and care? At this stage, name and address supplied is to be asked kept quiet. I was disgusted to get that.
Okay, I'll respond. Is there a specific question before I respond?
I wasn't asking about the previous meeting. I'm asking, what are we going to do about this? Because, I mean, the other meeting that has been for somehow cross-referenced and mislaid, I'm not holding anybody responsible. But when I got that in my email, I was disgusted, and that added further fuel to the 3 comments that I've already said to you that we were going to discuss.
Okay, so in order for me to completely understand what happened to this customer, I would ask if you would be able to find out the precise time they called and the phone number they called, because we can forensically analyse calls as they come through so we can see what happened. 10 to 15 minutes to get through the menu. Our menu isn't that long. The reason that I know that it isn't that long is because it was 2.5 minutes previously, and we reduced it to 10 seconds and have had to add a couple more options because of rebates that have come in. So to take 10 to 15 minutes to get through a menu, I'm a little bit concerned about the number they've called because we don't have that.
Well, I'm very concerned because I've got to temper my reply to you because of the debacle that's gone on early with other questions. I'm angry because I will now go and ask a pensioner who's 87 years old to remember person, time, date, time, and person they spoke to. I do not believe for one moment that this person is making this up. They have
No. I've not.
They have taken the time to write me a letter, which I've had to put into an email, and I've still got the original letter. That person is angry. That person is upset. And quite frankly, they said to me, the organisation at Norfolk District Council stinks. And I'm very angry because that's it's in my ward that I've worked very hard, just like every other member. And coming on, no, Madam Chairman.
Excuse me, can I just remind members that this is a question and answer
I'm asking a question,
session.
thank you
This
very
is
much.
not
And
a
I think you
debate.
better keep quiet at the back there.
Excuse me, Councillor Pearce.
Excuse me, I'm talking as chairman of the Constitution Working Party
Look,
now.
everybody
and-
started to be slightly.
You can blame the leader for that, for getting behind legal hogwash at the other questions.
Councillor Pearce, stop.
Don't you tell me to
No,
stop.
no, I was asking all of you to stop.
Don't you dare tell me to stop. I'm asking a question.
Yes, excuse me.
I think Councillor Shires has outlined a way that Councillor Pearce's question or the concern of his constituent can be answered outside of this meeting.
We tried that before, Mr. Black, and it didn't work through some reasons, which I've yet to find an answer for.
I think if you're unable to provide those contact details of the of the concerned resident to Councillor Shires. If you wish to provide them to myself, I will investigate the matter and you will be provided with a response. I'm not able to comment further at this time without the details of the call that you refer to.
With the greatest of respect, Mr. Blatch, this is to the member, not to an officer.
Okay.
And I feel very upset because irrespective of my passion, of which I believe I'm correctly directed, we did have a meeting which has gone wrong. I did say to you that is not part of the situation here, but this coming on top
Nigel.
is insult to injury.
Nigel, you've been asking and replying. This is not how it works in this session. We make mistakes, I know. We're all fallible, but it's a question and an answer, and you've had the reply that if you
I haven't, Madam Chairman.
if you can supply some details of this person who's been upset, then Lucy or Mr. Blatch can give you a written reply.
No, Madam Chairman, that is not the case. I'm arguing a point of order here. Hang on. You've asked me. I will now calm down because I am angry.
Well,
I accept,
You
Mr.
are using up all the time. You've got 2 minutes left.
Then you don't want to do it. Okay, fine. Good night, Sam Perrier.
Councillor Pearce, if you continue to speak over me, I cannot answer your question. Okay, if I can please continue my answer, which you didn't allow me to do before, and I haven't been able to do since. I have offered to forensically analyse if we get the number that was called. I'm not asking which number they called from. I'm not asking for their names. I'm not asking for their address. I'm asking for the number they called and the time they called, and we can see what happens. I'm a little bit concerned that they've phoned a number that takes 10 to 15 minutes to get through a menu. That isn't our menu. After 1 minute of being on hold, they would have been offered the option to leave an answering machine message. You haven't said that that was offered. So I'm really concerned which number they've called.
I will only say that I'm passing on the information supplied by the constituent, if that is the word we're going to use. The constituent was a pensioner. He or she, at this stage, waited for a week before they got to me to make sure of their facts. I will go back and ask. But at the end of the day, Lucy, it took 5 weeks to arrange this meeting after the last but one previous council meeting,
Nigel,
and it got lost. I'm not very happy.
We've got 35 seconds and Officer.
I think we're at about the end of the portfolio holder session. It is one question and a response, a possible supplementary question, not statements, it's questions. And I think that's the end of the 30 minutes according to my timer.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We now pass on to number 10.
Can I just say, if I may ask, Councillor Holiday has one question, which is a fairly brief one, I believe. So we've actually had it. We soaked up quite a lot of time here arguing backs and forth. It seems only reasonable that she be allowed to ask that question, please.
Yes, okay. Victoria.
I mean, I'm rather resentful that we have wasted a lot of time on completely unnecessary chat. Anyway, I rang the switchboard last Wednesday. It took me 21 minutes plus to get through to switchboard. Okay, not even getting to your menu. And I was looking at InPhase. And as you remember, Lucy, I had those 2 online forms, both of which took 6 weeks not to be answered. And okay, you've had lots of reasons why that had happened. But so I looked at InPhase and there's no range, for example, the call length and queue time actually on your data. So there's no indication there that there might be outliers of 21 plus minutes for someone. And if I've been calling from a mobile pay-as-you-go phone, just think how much that would have cost. And then I looked at InPhase a little bit more. And for example, you've got your service level percentage, which is the number of calls answered, which you quite cleverly hide. And you say 88.2% have been answered, but that means 12% haven't been answered and they've just been rejected. So I would like a bit of clarification on that. And then I started looking at the online contents. You don't give the number that are rejected or not processed, you only give the volume, and the same for the web forms. And so I think there's a lot of data not being presented on InPhase that I would like to see. And I would particularly like to know why it took 21 minutes to get through to switchboard. Thank you.
Well, I think she could actually elaborate a little bit on in-phase and its lack of information in a public forum, because the written answer won't actually be seen by anybody but myself. Thank you.
But written, but still, there we go.
No, of course, of course. So I'm disappointed that you don't see what I get to see on in-phase. So I will look at the team and ask why that hasn't rolled out yet. There's no reason why you shouldn't have access to the same data that I've got. Do you want me to address the other points, or are you happy for those to be done in writing?
Are you saying that there is the data that I'm requesting, the number of calls that aren't answered, and the number of web forms that aren't answered, the number of online contacts that aren't answered, and the range of time, the minimum, maximum time that people are waiting? You're saying that's available?
So with regards to the calls that don't get through to an advisor, whether or not that's because somebody hangs up, whether or not it's because they've self-served online, whether or not they've got fed up, I'm not going to discount that, whether or not somebody's knocked at the door and they've had to drop the call, or whether or not they've realised it's not important. There are lots of different ways why somebody would not hang on the phone. We do have that data. The answering to the forms, well, we met and spoke about that, didn't we? And the difficulties in when customer service then pass it back into the organisation and it doesn't get chased up. So you know where we are with that and the journey we've got to make on that.
Yeah, but my understanding was that data was going to be available and it isn't.
Yes, it will be available. I'm not entirely sure on the date it will be available, but I'm more than happy to meet with you again to go through it all.
Now, finished the portfolio reports. We now go on to number 10, recommendations from Cabinet. 6th of June. And who's speaking to this, please? This is Chroma Pier. Lucy, over to you.
That'll be me again. I'm not trying to hug the meeting, I assure you all. The paper is before you. It's been through Cabinet. I just wanted to question the purple papers because it was my understanding that some of the items in the purple papers would be carried forward into the report for full counsel, for full transparency, and they haven't been.
Can you reply to that, please?
The figures stated in the resolution, so that's the record. So there is a public record of the amount of the contract or the budget you present to be made.
Okay, thank you. I'm satisfied with that. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Councillor Shires on the Chroma Pier infrastructure works? Tom? Was he? Chris, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Shires actually made the point, I think I raised at Cabinet, that there is indeed, I thought, considerably more information that is in the purple papers, which the benefit of anyone listening here is the sort of the private papers that members get would be carried forward into the public domain. And I think that is important because if you look at the figure quoted there in terms of looking at the capital budget requested of 1,134,000, again, that's a huge sum of money which comes out of the council's purse. As we will all know, that is a huge sum of money spent on the previous huge sums of money, which I think I understand that we were told in previous administrations that a lot of money needs to be spent and that will be it. That will be fine. The pier will be sound for another 15 years. But it appears actually that within that time frame, we're coming back for another slug of money to do that. And I do think the point is I appreciate that obviously the pier needs to be maintained, but I just think every time we come along here, we're asked all the time to endorse large sums of money. It really is. I know some will call it the jewel of the coast, and maybe for some it is, but I suspect in sort of the Fakenham neck of the woods, it probably isn't. I think many would view that as actually much a black hole. I do think some real consideration does need to be given about actually what money this council spends on that, and what other options there might be in order to maintain the actual pier itself. Taking at face value that 1.1 million is fine, but it's a huge slice of the council's reserve going into that and to maintaining that building. So.
Sorry, Councillor Cushing, what was the question?
Sorry, you didn't have your microphone on. Is the gist of the question, just to save you having to repeat it, about the sums of money that we're spending on maintaining the pier?
Sorry for my microphone. So the question is, what other options can be considered? Because again, it's just always the same. It's more money every time we come along, millions of pounds going into maintaining the pier. I appreciate the council probably have the duty in order to do that, but are there any other cheaper options that can be looked at? I suppose the question does need to be asked is why have we spent all this money in the past, which I understand is many, many millions of pounds, on the assumption we were told, the previous administrations were told, that money was shored up for about 15 years. Well, clearly that money hasn't shored it up for 15 years. It needs more money spent on it now. So why was sort of previous work that was undertaken not done the actual job it was meant to do?
Okay, that's great. As far as I'm aware, this has always been a 3-phase project. And this is the 3rd and final phase, as far as I'm aware. It is necessary that we do this work. You can see that in the paper. The other alternative would be to dismantle the pier. And I wouldn't think that that's what the opposition is suggesting.
Chris, do you wish to reply to that?
I thought the whole point is we ask questions. They don't, cabinet members don't ask questions.
I think Councillor Shires is just putting forward what an alternative outcome would be if we don't spend money on supporting the pier at this time. Right. Anything else? Did it answer your question, Chris?
Not really, Matt. But I do think there is work does need to be done. It's obviously not for an answer here, but to understand what undertakings and what money has been spent in the past and why we still need to spend more money. And also actually thinking about it and what guarantees have we got that this extra 1.1 billion will do the job, and there won't be another 4 years time. There won't be another people, whoever it may be, coming back with their cap again, asking for even more money.
Officer Blatch would like to speak.
Well, the Cromer Pier, obviously, as the report says, is an iconic and Grade 2 listed structure. It is the authority's responsibility to maintain that structure. There are choices available to the authority in how it does that. It has sought technical advice over a period of time, and as the portfolio member has said, there was a phased programme of investment that was required, and this is the third and final phase of investment in that programme window. Obviously, the structure is in a very extreme and marine and maritime environment. So there are obligations and duties and liabilities which fall on the authority to maintain what is a highly regarded structure and does underpin the tourism offer and identity of the North Norfolk coast. The authority does have choices as to the standard to which that facility is maintained, but there are other examples around the country where both public and private sector owners of such piers have not made investment, and those facilities have deteriorated. The authority has in the past considered alternative models, such as sponsorship, such as a trust, and at that time those options weren't considered appropriate. It is open to the council to consider in the passage of time whether it wishes to revisit those models to see whether there is a more sustainable means of investment in the structure of the pier moving forward. But many authorities up and down the country do have responsibility for the care, guardianship and protection and preservation of assets such as Cromer Pier, and there are other authorities in Norfolk and beyond that have those responsibilities and obligations. But it is appropriate for members to ask questions about value for money and whether we're getting the best out of the structure relative to the investment is made, and there's a degree of choice which can be had in that regard, and that's a matter for you as elected members to have that discussion, debate to see where in the scale of your relative priorities that asset sits. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
I just think at some point we probably do need to continue to have that debate, because I do think that's not an unreasonable thing to ask. It is large sums of money. I do want to understand either way, are we going with the Rolls-Royce option? Is there sort of something cheaper that could be done? I just think when money is getting tight, things like that, we do need, it's incumbent upon us all to ask those questions.
Yes, you're quite right. Unfortunately, we can't monitor in surges, which is what happened in 2013, did massive damage to the pier. But thank you for that. And now, Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I must admit I'm baffled about why we have purple papers on this. According to this, the contract's been awarded both for the capital build and the insurance, and these costs are falling on the people of North Norfolk over £10 a head each, man, woman and child, even if they never go near Cromer, never mind the pier. But I actually want to ask about the tender process, because can I allude to the fact that there was only one tender received for each process, or does that breach the confidentiality? Because
Paragraph 1.2 says, following completion of an open tender process, the council received one tender. So I think there was an open tender process, but I do think at the present time, construction
what I want to know is, can I continue to ask questions without breaching confidentiality of this? Because I can understand one tender process bringing in just one bid, but we've had two tenders, one for insurance and one for capital sums, both of them large sums, and both of them have only brought in one bid. Now that suggests to me there are questions about, have those tender processes been done properly, that in each case they only bring in one bid. One I could understand, but two leaves me baffled, because it's very unusual only to get one bid in my experience. Also, can I talk about the valuation of cost of reconstructing the pier, or is that confidential as well?
That's the next item on the agenda. But I'm happy to address the point that Councillor Fitzpatrick raises, if that's permissible at this stage. If not, we can provide a written answer.
Yeah, sorry, it's slightly because there's one's a bullet point and the others are the approval of an insurance contract, but they've both just been brought forward at once. But suddenly the cost of rebuild has doubled, and so is that suddenly come along, or is that confidential? Is that something that can't be disclosed to the people of North Norfolk as well? I'm just really, what I'm saying is I'm at a total loss, and I think from the sound of things, I'm not the only one here, and I think that applies right across the people facing in different directions. I'm at a total loss to understand, total loss referring to the pier with its huge amount of insurance. I'm a total loss to understand why the people of North Norfolk cannot have all the details of this paper disclosed to them. Can the monitoring officer tell me, just give me the paragraph numbers that make this confidential?
That would be paragraph 3, which is information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person. That includes outside persons and also the council.
Sorry, is that paragraph 3? Sorry, which page is that? The tender process. So are you, sorry, is the monitoring officer talking about the Constitution? I'm asking where it says in these where in these papers and the paragraph numbers in these papers. That's what I'm asking. Tell me which paragraph numbers mean that it shouldn't be disclosed to the public, because I cannot find anything in it. And paragraph 3 in these papers says tender process, an open tender process. So that tender process by its very nature must be disclosed. So where in these papers is something that is so confidential that it must be in purple papers?
I believe it's at the top of page 71 on the top left-hand corner, not for publication, and there it details paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A.
Yeah, no, sorry, that is not an answer to my question. I'm sorry, I'm going to push this point because that is saying, that is why you can't disclose, and I'm going out my way not to disclose anything that breaches that. Otherwise, I'm happy to go into, I'm happy that I'll start asking more detailed questions on it. I want to know, and I'm quite happy for the monitoring officer to give me the paragraph numbers of the purple papers, the paragraph numbers that say those cannot be disclosed. And if the monitoring officers cannot do that, I will actually raise this as an official complaint.
Thank you. I think Councillor Shires wants to say something. I'm not sure I've properly understood the question, but
I want to know from the monitoring officer which paragraphs in these purple papers are exempt and why they're exempt. Just give me the paragraph numbers, and I don't need it explained by council. I'm asking the monitoring officer because it's referring to a point.
Councillor Fitzpatrick, as I was saying, I was halfway through the sentence because there was a but on the end of it. I believe in paragraph 11.4 on page 77, it's because there are various options.
That's the insurance.
And these are confidential. I'm appalled.
I think there's some, Tom, I have to say, I think there is some muddling here.
So
We've got the situation of, in the first one, capital expenditure, which you've queried of 1.134 million, and then which we will vote on that one, and then we'll go to the approval of the insurance contract.
What I'm querying is why these figures are in purple paper, because it's an open tender process. And I'm saying, so I'm saying, was the tender process on each case flawed? I'm quite happy to come back and do this all again for the insurance. I'm just wrapping them back, but taking them together because they're on the one set of papers. But I'm sorry, I find it hard that the conclusion recommendations are actually what makes this exempt, when the conclusion and recommendations by their very nature are based on the rest of the paper. So as the monitoring officer saying, the first 10 paragraphs are not exempt, but only paragraph 11 is. And if so, why isn't only paragraph 11 on the purple papers?
I understand that this is in regards to contracts that haven't been awarded, it's negotiations, and at this stage, that therefore makes it confidential information, which is therefore not for publication under that paragraph 3, which I referred to earlier, in that it relates to financial business affairs of either third parties or the council or the council.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll refer to the paragraph 3 in the purple papers, which says an open tender process ran between March and May and has now been completed. So it's not been completed. So are the papers wrong?
Councillor Shires, can you add anything before we get even more embroiled in this thing?
I can a little bit, because I feel like we're getting a little bit confused between the two papers. Are you discussing the insurance, the next item, rather than the peer?
We're supposed to be doing the peer.
Can we clear off the peer and then move on to the insurance, and then we're not getting confused?
Is that all right, Tom? We'll do the peer first.
What I'm querying is the whole point of the purple papers. Okay, surely the insurance relates to the peer, so we're not clearing off the peer. So it's the capital bid and the insurance bid. That's fine. But what I'm saying is there are two. So that one, and I'm sorry, I'm not happy with the monitoring officer's answer about why these papers are exempt. And I think I'm not alone here, and I think it's across both sides. I cannot see why these are exempt. All that needed to be made exempt was the name of the winning bidder, and then the rest of it could have been in public domain, unless we're in the standstill period for either contract. And are we, and I'm quite happy with a yes or no answer for either or both.
Councillor Shires.
Sorry, me again. The insurance document hasn't been awarded yet. That's what we're discussing tonight. So that's why it's completely in purple papers. The peer, as I alluded to when I opened my statement, I wasn't content that we still had purple papers there because I felt it should have been open and transparent. And the chief executive noted that and stated that the amount for the peer was put into the cabinet recommendation, which is in the papers.
Which is public
The
knowledge.
first item is to establish a budget for those capital works that reflects the tender that's been received but doesn't appear to be awarded yet at 1.6. And the insurance contract, there was a choice of options which were available to the cabinet and would form a discussion or negotiation with Zurich Municipal Insurance, who have been the council's long-standing insurers, but in terms of premium renewal, there was a significant increase in the premium that was presented or quoted to us, that the chroma pier was a specific and named item in that premium renewal, and there were options available to the cabinet which were discussed under private business, and officers have taken away and held further conversations with Zurich, which allows the recommendation to be promoted in front of you this evening, that for that item 18, approval of the insurance contract, that we need to make additional budgetary provision for the insurance of the pier in the event of total loss, and the authority has made officers and consultation with members of cabinet have identified, or agreed the amount of excess that is the authority is prepared to meet in the event of catastrophic loss, and those conversations have been had with Zurich in the days since cabinet met on the 6th of June. I think we're all agreed that the chroma pier structure it's not unique, but it is a rare structure for which an assessment of insurance will be made in terms of insurance cover. Councillor Fitzpatrick asked about the valuation of the pier, and in terms of the discussions and learning from the capital budget item that is referred to previously at the first agenda item 14 under item 10 on today's agenda. Because of the learning from that, the construction cost issues, the specialist marine environment, if the pier was to suffer catastrophic loss and the authority decided that it should be replaced, the valuation needs to reflect that total re-provision. And I believe that's why the insurance contract element is in your exempt pages today, because it was the report that went to cabinet and presented the options that were known to the authority in terms of the risk and insurance cover, and that's carried forward into the resolution for the additional £81,200 additional budgetary provision that's been made to cover that insurance risk for that structure as part of the overall council Zurich insurance premium. I hope that's helpful.
Right, thanks for that. However, one of the things was, why is this exempt? And I went out my way not to mention the name of the insurer. I went out my way not to mention anything and breach the confidentiality. But given that it's okay to give the name of the insurer, and I've alluded to two tender processes that both only bring one person. I've asked if there's a standstill on either of these, and I'm happy with a yes or a no answer. I've not had either a yes or a no. It might be I don't know. However, given that the name of the insurer has been disclosed by the chief executive, why is the rest, why is this still, and why shouldn't it be disclosed? I don't have any problem with that. I think the whole lot should be disclosed, and I'm still at a loss to know why the people of North Norfolk living in the fields and the byways aren't being told what they're paying for, because I think that's only fair. And I really do not think these should be in purple papers.
Thank
And
you.
that's the whole point.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Houston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am slightly in sympathy with Councillor Fitzpatrick, because in fact I find it confusing, because the actual capital sum is actually in the white papers. And therefore, really, the purple papers, if necessary, should be to deal with Zurich, if that is the case. But it is confusing.
Yes, I know. And Councillor Shires has pointed this out earlier, that she could not see why the purple papers were there for this particular part of the presentation. So I think what we'll do first is we'll go with the recommendation of the Cromer-Pier infrastructure works, the capital budget of 1.134, to see whether we agree with this or not. So can I have a proposer that we go with that, just that section? We're not doing the insurance, just that section. Right. Recorded vote from, request from Councillor Adams. Recorded vote. Right. You're seconding, are you, Lucy?
I'm happy. Do I need to second the recorded vote? Yes, I'll second that so I can propose the paper. I need to propose the recommendation, don't I, for us to vote on?
I thought you had proposed the recommendation. Oh, I beg your pardon. You're proposing, Tim's proposing, and you're seconding. Right, okay. We'll now go to a recorded vote for the first section, which is A, Cromer-Pier infrastructure works.
Thank you. So going through alphabetically for the recommendation, Councillor Adams, Councillor Bevan-Jones, four. Councillor Birch,
Four.
Councillor Blathwaite,
Four.
Councillor Espitakofer,
Four.
Councillor Cushing,
Abstain.
Councillor Dixon, Councillor Fitch-Tillett,
Four.
Councillor Fisher,
Four.
Councillor T Fitzpatrick, Councillor V Fitzpatrick,
Abstain.
Councillor Fredericks,
Four.
Councillor Gay, Councillor Grove-Jones,
Four.
Councillor Hayman, Councillor Heinink,
Four.
Councillor Holiday, Councillor Housden,
Abstain.
Councillor Kershaw,
Four.
Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Mancini Boyle, absent, Councillor Pearce,
Abstain.
Councillor Penfold,
Four.
Councillor Rest, Councillor Seward, Councillor Shires, Councillor Spagnola, Councillor Stenton, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Vardy, Councillor Varley, Councillor Withington. Four. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 abstentions.
So it's carried. This part of the recommendation is carried. We now pass on to section B, approval of the insurance contract. And I think the reason, as it was pointed out, is that this has not been confirmed yet. So the figures are still to be discussed and agreed. I think that's right, is that not so, Cara?
That's right. So moving on to the second part, approval of insurance contract.
Which is on page 71. If you'd like to go to your insurance contract in our purple pages. Who's speaking to this, please?
Madam Chairman, In order to move this along, points have been made. I will simply move the recommendation as set out in the papers.
Have we a seconder, councillor Shires? So what option?
So we're voting on the recommendation, on this recommendation here.
What page is that?
Here.
I get completely confused.
It's this.
All right, so are you with me? So we're going to, it's resolved to recommend to full council that additional budget provision is made for 2022/23 of 81.2k to be funded from the delivery plan reserve if required at the year end. Can I have a proposer? And who's seconding? Councillor Shires. Can we please have a vote? Do you want another recorded vote, Tim? No, so it's just a show of hands. For the recommendation for the approval. Against? And abstain?
Abstain.
12. So that has been carried. Thank you. Now we go on to item 11. Recommendations from Overview and Scrutiny Committee. 15th of June and the O&S annual report. It would be presented by Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mindful of the clock and in pursuit of brevity, I will restrict my comments, I think, to the recommendations. So if I just turn to the recommendations overleaf, which, as it says, it is recommended that the council notes the report and affirms the work of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee and considers the following concerns raised within the report. Before I mention those three recommendations, I ought to just prefix them, I think, with they have been raised in previous years. And I know that we are in pursuit of making the best use of time for Overview and Scrutiny and adding as much value as we can to the business that it transacts. These three recommendations, as I said, they've been raised before, but quite frankly, they are still outstanding, and they are a constraint and a restriction on the extent to which the committee can add value and grow in its influence. So I will mention them so that additional committee substitutes required to adequately address the number of apologies given. More often than not, when apologies are given, the substitutes are not forthcoming. Therefore, there are vacant seats and therefore the coverage, if you like, in terms of member input is deficient. Second one is late submission of reports continues to cause volatility in the work programme. So at pre-agenda in particular, I'm not seeing, and nor is the Democratic Services seeing the reports in draft, and therefore there is no opportunity to comment on them, get them improved, get them, if you like, more fit for purpose and ready for transaction of the business. The last one relates to too many last-minute requests to include items under urgent business, which degrades both the quality of the scrutiny and the opportunities to add maximum value to the process. I think to some extent that must speak for itself. I try to be, and at pre-agenda we try to be flexible and accommodating, but there is a limit to which you can do that before you start to degrade the quality of the scrutiny. So I draw those three recommendations to the attention of those who have the influence to improve those matters. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. May I just ask, do you have a list of substitutes and they are supposed to be provided? Thank you. Right, so we go now to the recommendations. Can I, as Councillor Dixon has read out on page, I don't know what page it is, I haven't got it. Anyway, so can I have a proposer for the recommendations? Councillor Cushing and a seconder, please. Councillor Pearce. Could we have a show of hands? All those in favour?
Unanimous.
That's unanimous, that's passed. Thank you, Nigel. Now we go on to the extension of the temporary increase to mileage rates due to the significant increase in fuel costs. I think, James, you are speaking to this?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. For you, you have obviously read the report. I have nothing further to add, along with sort of obviously just my insistence that sort of my recommendation for option number 2 still stands, but happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, thank you. It's not a question. Unfortunately, I will not be supporting this proposal. I know how hard our staff work. I know the fuel costs, but I think at the moment this is the wrong message to send out to the public at a time of severely rising costs right across the board. Inflation is the highest it's been for many years. People are seeing the cost of their mortgages going up. They're seeing the cost of baskets of food in the supermarket going up. And many people have been pushed to the brink and they have absolutely nowhere to turn. I think I'm very sorry, but it is exactly the wrong message to give to the hard-pressed people of Norfolk at this time. And I'd also ask that we have a recorded vote on this as well, please.
Certainly. Councillor Hayman.
Thank you. I've got a couple of observations and a question, really. But I did want to echo Councillor Fitzpatrick's comments then. I think the timing and the optics are wrong for this particular decision this evening. The report says that it's a gesture after discussions with the unions or pressure from the unions and staff body representatives to make some ameliorative gesture. But I think that's wrong. I think it sends out the wrong message. It sends the wrong message to the public. I do think there's a problem sometimes with expenses that if they're higher, it encourages greater use. And I wonder whether actually lowering them might encourage less use of vehicles. I also think that there ought to be sort of a council-wide process of bearing down on unnecessary car journeys and travel to try and reduce our overall costs. But I would have thought that our portfolio holder responsible for the environment would have something to say about this as well. I can see that the overall trajectory since COVID has reduced the overall cost up till now, but there are other benefits from the new methods of working which have come into place. And I do think that we ought to be looking at trying to cut the costs overall and look at what's necessary and what isn't, and for managers to really bear down on staff to ensure that journeys are absolutely essential for the carrying out of council business.
Have you asked a question yet?
No, I was going to make several observations and then a question. I'm coming to the question, which is, do the increase or will the increase in mileage also relate to the mileage that councillors can claim for meetings? And if so, I would strongly urge that they were excluded from that. If that's possible to amend the decision this evening, if councillors' mileage is included, I would object to that hugely, and I would suggest that it was deleted from the overall package. So perhaps you can advise whether that's the case or not.
James, could you reply?
Yeah, this paper is purely about officers' mileage rates, and I believe that there's further there is a further process for members to be dealt with in that respect.
The other thing I wanted to ask as a question, thank you for asking that, answering that. I'm not exactly reassured by that we're not going to get a request for councillors' mileage to be increased. But is it possible to have a list? I don't know whether that's publicly available, of
all officers and the mileage that they clock up over a year made available to us for overview and scrutiny to look at.
On a service basis, yes, it's something that we could facilitate.
Right, thank you, Councillor Hayman. Councillor Vincent Fitzpatrick.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think this is a really difficult one because I'll bring you some news that you might not realise, but the District Council is not always held, in 100% positive regard by our residents. I know this might come as a shock to some people. And I think awarding a really sizable increase in mileage expenses will actually cause a significant amount of reputational damage to the council. Because I was heading off to rural Hampshire the other day, filling up at the cheapest petrol station I could find, Sainsbury's. And I had a discussion with a couple of other people, and some people find real pain with petrol, other costs of living costs. So I think that this increase would be very much a them and us. Oh yes, the council looks after itself, but who pays for it? Us, the residents. I just think it's a shocking, terrible message to be sending out. I do have full sympathy for officers have to use their own vehicles to exercise the duties, but I will concur with Councillor Hayman. Obviously, people need to look at alternatives. Can they share cars? Can they have an online meeting? Can they make a simple phone call instead? We really must look at cutting car usage on official business.
Thank you. Nigel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to take a little bit of what everybody has said because we are in a very difficult situation. We are faced with these high petrol costs, yet we still pay our officers, quite rightly, for working at home. We have been blessed with modern technology, which when it does prove to work, it does work very well. We should utilise fully more these electronic wizardry. I know sometimes people say you go on Zoom, you go on Teams, you can't read the meeting. Okay, fine. We've got to get through that. But to actually blatantly, and I call it blatant, to put up to the increase on the casual user is the most unfortunate turn of phrase. We only want necessary journeys. And whilst I do value the officers, despite sometimes frayed tempers in this chamber, they do a good amount and harborization of work. And I do think I feel very sorry for them. But at the same time, we haven't got an increase. I don't think we should have one. And we get pro rata expenses much less than any salaries. That's not a point I'm grumbling at. I think this is the wrong call at the wrong time, especially also when our learned members here are asking us certain quarters to go to ground net zero, when we don't have any emissions at all. And here we are given an approval to increase your car journeys. No, it's not on.
Thank you. And Councillor Adams, then Councillor Housden.
I first of all just want to tackle the insinuation that staff are making unnecessary journeys. This is business travel, and as has been highlighted, I believe even by Councillor Hayman, the rate of the number of those journeys has decreased since COVID. This won't break the bank, and I'm absolutely comfortable with us supporting our staff members undertaking travel. I mean, I would call on government to do something more about these fuel costs, because nothing has happened. If they have been doing something that's been completely ineffectual. I have challenged one Norfolk MP on this, and it's affecting everyone, of course, besides staff members, but we should be trying to enable the business of this council by supporting staff members undertake business journeys. This is a temporary increase. It's not permanent. We obviously will seek to review it when these very high fuel prices, I hope, come down soon, and the sooner the better.
Thank you,
That's all I wish to say. I do wish to propose the recommendations.
You're proposing, who's seconding? I know someone else does want to. Oh, sorry. All right, okay. So you're proposing Nigel and then the two
No,
Nigels.
sorry, no, I've got a question.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, fine. Okay,
Yes?
fine, thank you. I mean, I think it's totally inappropriate at this time, but I'd like to just ask James, paragraph 2.6, James, please. Norfolk District Council employee terms and conditions are governed by the Green Book for officers. So if we were to reject this in this chamber tonight, what strength does the Green Book have? Are we in contravention of the Green Book, or are we able to make our own decisions in the context of the fuel increase?
That's a really good question, really good point. This is a local agreement made between us and Unison. And it's been agreed, and it was agreed temporarily, but it's obviously come to this evening for it to be formally ratified with an appropriate amount of governance in for the rest of this year.
Right, and as I understand it from these papers, if it were to be agreed, it's a temporary 3 months for it to be for its implementation. And then what is the review period after 3 months?
It's monthly.
So it's a monthly review.
It's a monthly. The chief executive will review the fuel prices on a monthly basis, and if there is any movement in it, then obviously we'll reflect our. We'll sort of.
And then it would
reflect our
drop down pro rata, or would it go back to 45 pence a mile?
That's a really good question, and that's something that hasn't been. I mean, it's a very volatile environment out there, as we all know. So that's a little bit of an unknown. The only assurance that's appropriate to be given is that it's going to be reviewed monthly. If there is movement, we'll react accordingly.
So potentially it could go up as well as go down.
Not
it could go up beyond the 60 pence.
Not in the next 12 months, no.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just thought I'd better say something. So climate change has been mentioned. So moves are afoot to as a gradual swap over to electric vehicle fleets in the council. I'd just like to point that out as contracts are coming to an end with leased vehicles. That's the way we're heading. It makes no economic sense to end a lease early and pay penalties. So we'll let that run its course. And I also know that HR are working on innovative schemes to assist staff in a swap over of private cars, of their own private cars, using a salary sacrifice scheme that costs the council nothing. So there are moves ahead. They're complicated, they're difficult. There needs to be staff consultation and all that. But I would say that I know some in the environmental team, in my team, I can't speak for everyone in different portfolios, but they need to travel right across the district, and our district is long and 40 miles of coastline, etc., etc. They need to react to complaints. They need to react to environmental health. They have to go out and meet people, and that is a necessary part of their job. Wherever we can, we use the technology that's available, and we do so more and more. And but there still remains a need to use vehicles.
Thank you. Just two more people, and then I think we must close this down because it's now 8:10. Harry, you wanted to speak.
Yeah, just to say that I find this a difficult thing to agree to, but I do see that we live in an incredibly rural area. We are in competition with other councils of a more urban nature for high-grade officers. And if we are to attract the best to our district council, I think we have to recognise that being in a rural area has to be compensated. So having paid £2 a litre in Ludham this morning, I feel that I will second this proposal if I have to, if nobody else will. And as I say, however reluctantly.
Thank you, Harry. And then finally, Eric.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it's a question. As I understand from a previous answer that this is a locally negotiated agreement between Unison and the authorities. Unison, yeah, and the authority here. Has this been projected to other local authorities, other districts within Norfolk, or is it just this council going on its own?
This was a local agreement with our local union representatives. Quite what takes part outside of the building is clearly a Unison matter.
Yeah, thank you. It's not really the answer I wanted to hear, but yes, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Whittaker would like to speak.
I think there's a lot of very good points being made. I think it is a very difficult decision. I think it's a very close decision. But I do think Councillor Blathwaite made some very good points that our staff travel incredibly long distances, and it is important to keep our excellent staff looked after. There are cases around the country where council staff are having to go to food banks now, and it is important that we make sure we are looking after our staff as best we can. But I do appreciate it's a very difficult decision, and I too would not be in support of allowing councillors the same allowance.
Right, we're going to go to the vote now. I would just like to point out that during my reading of my Saturday paper, it was interesting to see the breakdown of how much of the cost of a litre of petrol and diesel goes to the government in tax, which I feel has been mentioned before. It's conducive upon them to think about it again. The 5p that the Chancellor awarded actually seems derisive now. But anyway, we're going to the vote. So there's been a proposal by Tim Adams and seconded by Harry Blathwaite to accept the recommendation to agree option 2 to support the increased mileage rates. Yes, we are going to have a recorded vote. Yes.
I'm sorry, just for absolute clarity, it's not clear the procedure and process that was in place to come to this decision, and it's not in the document. And for absolute speediness, I know you're keen to get to the vote. Would it be possible that we agreed pending confirmation to the Cabinet of the procedures and processes that were taking place before this decision was made?
James, do you know anything about this? This is coming from your HR section.
Sorry, I don't quite, what, from a governance point of view or from a, so I think, so there were some discussions, as the paper says, between sort of myself and sort of at a Unison perspective. And we've obviously taken it through. There was a, as the report says, a delegated authority process. And then we find ourselves at this evening, and I will bow to the monitoring officer of the chief executive for more sort of definitive view on our structures and governance point of view perspective.
Excuse me, can I make a procedural resolution? Which is that this report is sent back to the relevant committees and officers to rework, and it's represented to us. I think there is serious concerns about now being raised about governance. We've also, and I've raised about optics, as some of my colleagues have as well. Councillor at the front there has also expressed elements of disquiet. I think this needs more careful thinking and working on before we take it. So can I propose that it's laid on the table or referred back?
Councillor Hayman's proposal, that's fine.
Yeah. So you're proposing this goes back to be reviewed?
Yes.
Are you proposing this?
Yes.
Is there a seconder to, right, Councillor Housden second it. Is this recorded or an ordinary vote? Just a vote? Yeah.
Sorry, a point of order, Madam Chairman, is the first, we've already had a proposal which has been seconded. Has that been withdrawn, or because they should come,
Yes,
according to
you're
our
right. You're
constitution, they should come in order. So
Yeah.
that's,
So Tim, are you prepared to go ahead or do you wish to withdraw?
Apologise, I don't withdraw my proposal at all.
You don't
but
withdraw
no.
your proposal. So we go ahead with the proposal as it stands, which is to,
So this is an amendment to the original.
You still have a procedural motion from me, which has to be voted on before the substantive. If
right,
it's,
we're going to vote on Greg's amendment, okay?
Oh.
So could you just repeat that again, Greg?
yes, that I'm proposing that this decision is sent back to the officers and the relevant committees to look at again. There are clearly problems with it that have been expressed and raised this evening, and I think it would be wrong of us to take a decision on it this evening. I think it would be bad politics, bad optics, but I think it's bad use of money and it's a bad decision-making process. It needs more time and more consideration.
Okay, Nigel, are you going to talk on that?
I was just going to say, Madam Chairman, I don't think, bearing in mind a councillor there and head of HR, how they both agree that the report is incorrect, how we can vote on it. This is supposed to be a ratification process. We cannot vote on something that is not complete. Therefore, it's a null and void vote and meaningless. Sorry, Madam Chairman, I think it's got to go back and come and be completed.
Well, that's what councillor Hayman's
I
just
propose
said.
that. Okay, but I was going to say that before he came in. I did say that.
Yes, we're voting. Right, can we please, before we all get muddle-headed and I get the gin out, can we please vote on councillor Hayman's proposal that this goes back basically to the drawing board, is presented to the committees that he feel that should for officers to review. This has been proposed by
Councillor Hayman.
and seconded by councillor Houston.
Yes.
For goodness sake, who's for this recommendation that we go back to the HR?
You're asking me whether I accept the amendment.
We're voting on the amendment first, and then
Yeah.
if that fails, we go back to.
We're going on the amendment.
Sure. So I didn't hear the question. I apologise.
Tim, it's not a question about the rights or wrongs of it. It's actually suggesting that it needs more work doing on it. So it's a procedural motion to return it for further work.
Yeah, that's fine. We're going for an amendment first. No, it's just that we're going, I haven't asked you anything. We're going for an amendment as councillor Hayman has suggested, okay? Now we're going to vote. So we're going to vote. Who is, councillor Cushing.
Sorry to probably muddy the waters even more, Madam Chair, but one quick point I would like to make out. I thought we were voting that the proposal was to increase the mileage from 45p to 60p. If you look at the bottom of page 90, it actually says it's already been increased to 60p a mile. Is that correct?
Has it been increased?
That is indeed correct. It was for an initial period of 3 months. And then obviously to bring into this forum now for formal approval.
Can I just ask, please, because I am confused as well.
You don't want it.
Officer
Don't want it.
Claps. Please. Did we go through the full procedures as are required during the Constitution, etc.?
The initial decision was taken under delegated powers with reference to appropriate officer. This seeks to formalise that arrangement, and that's why the recommendation is in front of you this evening. You have a choice as to whether to support it or not. There is a legitimate amendment made by councillor Hayman to set this aside and for the matter to be reconsidered or considered further before being brought back before you. And that's the amendment that I believe that needs to be voted on at this time.
Are we clear on this now? Everybody's clear. So we're going to go for vote. All those in favour of councillor Hayman's amendment? Hands raised. All those against?
Fifteen, 16,
17 and abstentions? 2 abstentions. That's carried. No, it's not carried. I beg your pardon. Now we go back to the original 16, 12, 17, 2.
Sorry, Madam Chairman,
16, 2.
everything else is added up to 30. Does that not add up to 31?
It's 12, 16 and 2.
How many members are present? That's all.
We now go to the original recommendation, which is proposed by Councillor Adams and seconded by Councillor Blathwaite, that we go with the recommendation as pointed out to agree option 2 to support the increased mileage rates for the remainder of the 2022-23 financial year, subject to monthly review by the Chief Executive, with the increased rates being removed if there is a significant reduction in fuel prices over that period. Are we clear on this?
And this is a recorded vote, I understand.
Recorded vote. Okay.
Councillor Adams. Councillor Bevan-Jones. Councillor Birch.
4.
Councillor Blathwaite.
4.
Councillor Espert-Cofer. 4. Councillor Cushing.
Against.
Councillor Dixon. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
4.
Councillor Fisher.
4.
Councillor T Fitzpatrick. Councillor V Fitzpatrick. Councillor Fredericks.
4.
Councillor Gay. Councillor Grove Jones.
4.
Councillor Hayman. Councillor Heining.
4.
Councillor Holiday. Councillor Housden. Councillor Kershaw.
4.
Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Pearce.
Against.
Councillor Penfold.
4.
Councillor Rest. Councillor Seward. Councillor Shires.
Abstain.
Councillor Stenton. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Vardy. Councillor Varley. Councillor Withington. 4. I have 17 for. 12 against and 1 abstention.
That's carried.
Excuse me. Would we mind having a break?
I was just going to say, actually, we've got quite a bit still to do. So 10 minutes. Thank you, everybody. We've got 2 more large items to go. There is an official time for these meetings that we finish at 9, but we also have opposition half an hour's worth, if you take that long. So, but first of all, before we get on to that, we've got to go to item 13, the interim section 151 officer arrangements. This is Steve Blatch.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The authority is legally required under section 151 of the Local Government Act 1972 to appoint appropriately qualified officer to have responsibility for the proper administration of the council's financial affairs. The council's director of resources has recently resigned, so we need to now make the arrangements to appoint a new section 151 officer pending recruitment into the substantive post. I have begun conversations with other local authority partners and the East of England Local Government Association about filling that vacancy on an interim basis to provide the necessary support for the council to fulfil its obligations under section 151. And therefore the report is before you in terms of the requirements that we would need in the period pending recruitment and appointment of a new director of resources. Given that in the time available to me, I haven't been able to conclude discussions with a neighbouring or nearby authority around those arrangements, but those conversations are positive. I'm seeking delegated authority for myself in conjunction with the 3 group leaders and finance portfolio holder to make an interim appointment of a chief finance section 151 officer with immediate effect pending the recruitment of a new director of resources. And council also needs to note that to support the recruitment and appointment of a new director of resources, that there would need to be an employment and appeals panel formed from the pool of members that are on that list to support that recruitment process. The 2 recommendations are before you. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak on this? Councillor Dixon and Councillor Adams. Councillor Dixon.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Can we be told, please, who has held the section 151 responsibilities for the council up to now? That's from the 1st of June to now, please.
The authority has a deputy section 151 officer, but she is absent from work at the present time through sickness. I have discussed that matter with the council's external auditors, and I've obviously brought this report to the authority, the council this evening at the first available opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
I simply wish to propose the recommendation.
Councillor Hayman.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question around the process and where we are at the moment, given that the terrible decision that has just been made and voted on by this administration, that is, if we'd had a section 151 officer in place, whether a terrible piece of work like that had to come before us. What I want to know is, and this is the question, what level of risk are we exposed to at the moment as a consequence of having no 151 officer and no deputy because they're off sick? And who else, is it the cleaner that's in charge of finances now? Where is the level of risk and what are you doing to mitigate that risk on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you, Greg.
I think the areas of activity where the council carries some risk is identified in paragraph 2.5 of the report in terms of those issues it would be possible for the council's designated Section 151 officer to take a period of annual leave and for any deputy to be absent from work through sickness. And at this point in time, that the council's position hasn't varied from that. I'm seeking to make an appointment as quickly as possible on an interim basis, and that's the nature of the report that's in front of you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kershaw.
I will second this.
Seconding. Thank you. Have we spoken now? Okay, we're going to a vote. It's been. Oh, I'm so sorry, Nigel. You didn't put your hand up.
No, I was about to. You got there before me. Sorry. Yes, what level of indemnity are we covered for under the current circumstances where it would appear we're slightly exposed without a 151 officer?
I'd have to come back to you on that. I have advised both the internal and external auditors of the council's position at the present time, and they've indicated that on the knowledge that I'm bringing this report to you this evening, that the council should look to make an appointment as soon as possible.
So that's Ernst & Young as part of that
That's
process.
correct.
Fine.
This is why
Thank
we
you.
need to do it quickly.
Thank you.
As you can see from the document that you have. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you,
Then I
Madam.
think we must go to a vote.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Since the 1st of June, what has been actually the arrangement for looking after this section, bearing in mind Mr. Blatch has just said that the person that is there is not there because they're on sick leave. So how has this been run, by which named officers, etc., to make sure that we're not to be indemnified against any, or to decrease the risk? Because this is, I don't sit easy with it.
The council has management processes in place to cover and provide line management to the finance and accountancy team, and that support has been given. I've outlined in paragraph section 2.5 of the report the issues where the authority carries some risk, and that's why the decision is in front of you this evening in terms of closing that gap by appointing an interim section 151 officer until a permanent recruitment can be undertaken.
Thank you. Now, can we please go to the recommendation, which is given on the first page of this extra piece of paper? That council provides delegated authority to the chief executive in consultation with the three group leaders and finance portfolio holder to make an interim appointment of a chief finance section 151 officer with immediate effect pending recruitment of a new director of resources, and that the council notes the need to establish an employment and appeals panel to support the process of recruiting and appointing a new director of resources. Now, this has been proposed by Councillor Adams and seconded by Councillor Kershaw, and we're going to the vote. So all those in favour, would you please raise your hand? This is unanimous. Thank you very much. Now, questions received from members, none received. Opposition business, and we're going over to Chris. Chris, we have 30 minutes for this one, so it's you first, and I'll just lay it out. Response from Tim Adams, then an open debate, and you have the right to reserve to speak till the end if you wish. Then it's Nigel Dixon, and then Christopher. That's if he wishes to reserve his right to speak. If you wish to reserve. Okay, so off to you, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The purpose of the opposition business item is to highlight the tremendous financial support that the government has given to North Norfolk over the last 2 years. When this government was elected in 2019, no one could have envisaged the global trials and tribulations which lay just around the corner. The COVID pandemic burst upon the nation in March 2020. The ensuing lockdowns threatened economic devastation for many businesses and their employees. The immediate pragmatic and bold response from this government resulted in over £130 million of business grants being paid out to over 3,500 businesses in North Norfolk. In addition, thousands of employees benefited from the government's furlough scheme, which kept many in employment when otherwise jobs would have been lost. Also, the universal credit uplift provided further help. Barely had the pandemic eased when there was a global surge in fuel costs, which has been exacerbated by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. This has stoked inflation and resulted in a cost of living challenge, which has not been seen for decades. Once again, this government has responded swiftly to help the most disadvantaged. Many of the grants and the financial support are listed in the motion of the text, and I don't intend to actually go through them all, you'll be pleased to know. However, I will pick out the energy rebate scheme, where the government has provided funding for NNDC to give households whose primary residence is valued in council tax bands A to D a one-off energy payment of £150. So far, 5,700,000 has been paid out to nearly 41,000 households in North Norfolk, with another 2,800 to go. Furthermore, all UK households will get a grant which will reduce their energy bills by £400 from October. Another grant I will highlight is the Council Tax Hardship Fund for 2020-2021, where the government has provided nearly 724,000 of funding to this council to allocate to applicants to help with the payment of their council tax during the pandemic. As at the 31st of March 2021, the council had paid out nearly 544,000, leaving an underspend of 180,000. Now, the government said that any leftover funds can be retained by councils to help provide further relief for 2021-2022. So the leftover 180,000 has been used to create a discretionary hardship and support grant, which is available to help council tax payers in need. Now, Madam Chairman, it will probably come as no surprise to you here that I'm delicate by nature, and I don't like bring myself to look at any material of an unpalatable nature, such as Liberal Democrat websites. However, my colleague, Councillor Stenton, is made of far sterner stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
I don't see why that is particularly untoward, Madam Chair. I
It is a political comment on you about the Lib Dems websites, etc.
Well, I will quote from the Liberal Democrat website then anyway, if I may. Thank you very much. There's a letter written there by Councillor Adams addressed to the residents of our district, which says, "We know these are incredibly tough times for many families across North Norfolk. We are determined to lend a helping hand to ease the burden where possible. That's why I'm delighted to announce that our new hardship and support grant here in North Norfolk, which will target those most in need. Payments from the Liberal Democrat-run North Norfolk District Council will be made to help alleviate poverty, support the vulnerable residents, and help people through personal and difficult circumstances. At a time when people justifiably feel abandoned by the government, I'm beyond proud that we're stepping in and providing much needed support people are crying out for." Well, I have to say, Madam Chairman, I don't think you can make that up. Councillor Adams is clearly trying to say to the public that this money comes from Liberal Democrat largesse. As he knows, that funding comes from the government allocated this council with a specific intention of helping to alleviate hardship among our most disadvantaged residents. Sadly, this is not the only shameful example of the Liberal Democrats trying to claim credit for the support the government has given to North Norfolk. Earlier, I mentioned the COVID support grants of over 130 million that were paid out to over 3,500 businesses during the pandemic. Now, my friend Councillor Vardy may be aware of a Liberal Democrat meeting leaflet that he saw earlier in the year. And this includes a section written by their parliamentary candidate on COVID grants, where it states, headline, Lib Dem action keeps local businesses afloat. The council has distributed an amazing 126 million so far to over 3,500 small businesses. Many businesses upon which North Norfolk depends simply wouldn't have survived the pandemic but for the timely help they received. While other Norfolk councils dithered and delayed, the Lib Dems here in North Norfolk got on with it and ensured local businesses weren't left to sink. And again, that is a complete perception. As we all know, it was the Conservative government that took the speedy action to provide the unprecedented levels of support to businesses in this council and indeed every other one throughout the UK. It was the officers of the council that did a superb job distributing those funds, and they justly received recognition by a national
Chris.
award.
Chris, I'm going to have to do it to you again. You are allowed 5 minutes, as everybody is, and you are, I think, fast approaching the end of your, can you wrap
I've
up?
just about finished anyway. Just
Oh,
about.
have you?
Yeah.
Oh, well, jolly good. Thank you.
Okay. The point I'm making, it's disappointing we have to raise an opposition business item on this. Make no mistake, it's the Conservative government has given tens of millions of pounds to this district to help businesses and residents
dear.
over the last 2 years to help ease the impacts of the pandemic and
Thank
the
you,
cost of
Chris.
living increases.
Can Tim Adams now respond to this, please?
Yes, of course. Well, I'm probably paraphrasing here. I don't think I was even born, but I do believe Mrs. Thatcher said, "It is your money. There's no such thing as public money, only ratepayers' money." So why should the people of North Norfolk be so grateful to the Conservatives? This is being requested of us despite the reduction in funding support to councils made available over a number of years, and in an area that has less per capita spend than it really should do. We currently have huge living cost pressures on residents, and as discussed earlier, the government has been entirely ineffectual, or certainly has achieved nothing on fuel. Many households got through winter because of the mild winter, and people continue to grapple with food costs. The grants are not enough to help people suffering with hardship, and we have had to carve out our own fund from limited resources available due to the responsible use of outside funding already received, helpfully highlighted. I do believe the latest housing support fund, of course, is also less than it was before. And many of the grants we have to apply for, of course, these are not necessarily easy processes, often punishing timescales and soak up a lot of staff time. So whilst we always make the best case for the authority, and we often succeed, I think that should be stressed. In terms of the Heritage Action Zone, we bid and won that funding, and we also invested our own money. I will be very clear, we will make the most of every funding opportunity and initiative we can. We have a track record of that at NNDC, and we have a track record of delivery as well, which has continued in this quarter, of course, with the rebate delivery. And that's not down to the government, that's down to NNDC. So these funding opportunities are not acts of generosity. They are a necessity. So I won't be supporting this motion. I'm quite happy to write to government, but it will be to demand that they do more to help residents who are struggling with fuel, food and travel costs, and to demand sustainable funding for local government in future. I would instead ask that the group leaders join me in writing to staff to thank them for getting all of these projects, initiatives and funds and delivering upon them. They have delivered more than we really could have possibly asked of them during the course of this administration, certainly in the last 2.5 years. And that was, of course, recognised by the government as well. That's all I wish to say. Thank you.
Well, there is an open debate now. Take questions. May I just remind you that you are given 5 minutes each speaker, and you can only speak once. Now, I have councillors. John.
Thank you, Chair. My comments are around your list of government provision. And I wondered why, to achieve a sense of balance, you've not mentioned some other contributions. An overspend of £10 billion on PPE, according to the Parliamentary Spending Watchdog, mainly due to inadequate stocks not being in store. In April 2020, MPs were offered £10,000 each to cover staff working from home during the pandemic. This was on top of the £26,000 that they already claimed to cover office costs. Track and trace. The government spent £37 billion on track and trace. And according to the Public Accounts Committee, this eye-watering amount did not achieve anywhere near its goal. Nightingale Hospitals, £530 million was spent to set up 7 Nightingale hospitals nationally. The outcome was that the country had been left with relatively unused emergency facilities. The bottom line was there was insufficient staff to operate these units. Freedom of information requests stated that only 272 patients were treated for COVID in a Nightingale hospital. Finally, I cannot put a monetary cost on the lives lost by allowing elderly, infected patients to be discharged into care homes. You will find all of that at various media outlets. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Bardi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Keeping to the facts, just to add to the facts given by Councillor Cushing, it's not only the funding by central government that this council and its residents are using to support its vulnerable and needy residents. There's also the £7.7 million package of hardship support introduced by Norfolk County Council to help a broad range of households. For example, the Cost of Living Support Fund will offer £3.6 million to support families with cost of living vouchers. A further £1 million allocated to the council's Norfolk Assistance Scheme to support families in hardship not eligible for free school meals, etc. £2.2 million, a third of government funding to support those aged 65 or over by providing vouchers and awards through the voluntary sector and including Anglian Water for those experiencing difficulties. And finally, 840k to support others in need, including funding for districts, borough and city councils to meet immediate housing related concerns. So maybe this council should consider thanking Norfolk County Council in addition to central government. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Can we now pass to Councillor Taylor Matthew?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I just wish to very quickly add my support to this motion. You know, reading the full list here in our agendas, the considerable support that the government has given to the residents of North Norfolk, I really do think speaks volumes. You know, this has been one of the most testing times in our recent history, most certainly since the end of the Second World War. I do think that without these support packages, the pandemic would have inflicted even more suffering on peoples and families across our district. Therefore, I only think it right that the leader of the council writes to the Chancellor to pay thanks on behalf of our residents. Thank you very much.
That's all right. I'm perfectly aware of which one it is. Others might not. It's obviously the close family resemblance. It probably causes confusion the other side, but no confusion this side. I think it's important that this has been brought forward because it lists the number. And I appreciate Councillor Rest's point about Nightingale hospitals. Well, actually, I personally was glad that those facilities were put in place, and I was even more glad that they didn't need to be used, because if they needed to be used, the mortuaries that were put in various parts of this country would have been well filled. So the government stepped up with the offer of funds, and of course, councils had to bid for it. That's the normal way to get funding. So I think it's been such a shame. This isn't a who does what thing, but unfortunately, passing off as if the funds have been dug out the bottomless pit when they could have been perhaps better used for structures on the sea might be there. But this is really important. There's a good list of stuff that's been done to benefit the people of North Norfolk, and that's what I've been elected to do to this district council, benefit the people of my ward, but benefit the wider people of North Norfolk. And I have to say, we tried earlier on at portfolios questions to get some straightforward statements out of the leader and none forthcoming. But I don't think we fall under the 1972 local government part 2 regulations, but at least it might have been a begrudging statement of thanks the government will all have done, but at least he's made a statement that's been positive about something this evening. And I think this is a really important, and I'm glad to my colleagues for bringing it, grateful to my colleagues for bringing it forward.
Sorry, Councillor Penfold.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually delighted that Councillor Cushing spends his time surfing Liberal Democrat websites. Well done you. He said that no one could have envisaged the trials and tribulations this government has faced since being elected in 2019. Well, actually we could, especially with Brexit, a problem entirely of this government's own making. I think if any letter is to be written, it should be to our staff here at NNDC for the amazing response and diligence they have shown through the pandemic and the distribution of grants. That's the letter we need to send. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it might be a little churlish of me not to acknowledge the allocation of funds from central government by DEFRA for CTAP. But I have to say, the credit really goes to Rachel Hill MPE, National Flood and Coast Risk Management at the EA. She attends the local government coastal SIG adaptation working party that I chair, and she was particularly supportive at Flood and Coast last week of what we are doing towards adaptation. I can't support all the nonsense that's gone on today. However, we are very grateful for the CTAP funding, which we will spend wisely and safely. Health and safety being the forefront at coastal.
Thank you. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when we look at the Household Support Fund, we weren't the only council to get it, but it's when you look at what the council does with the money and the benefit that brings to local residents. Many of you will remember the fight that opposition councillors had at the county council, the children, the households, the families that pleaded and pleaded for help over Easter. That took 6 weeks. That was not a decision that was taken. That was the opposition who forced the hand there. I am absolutely devastated for our local communities that the first option that the opposition asks us to write about is gratitude. A thank you will not feed the families of North Norfolk. A thank you will not keep them warm, and a thank you will not keep the lights on. I have never been so disappointed to read the words in front of me on behalf of the residents of North Norfolk. I'm appalled.
Thank you. Vincent.
Yeah, just to save any confusion, which Fitzpatrick, you're getting both full sets. Lucky you.
Difficult to tell you apart, I must say.
There's many people in the same boat, but but to be 100% serious now, first of all, thanks obviously go to the authorities officers for the way in which they distributed these funds. And then if we think about these funds and these grants, there's been many a business saved, there's been many a job saved, that there's been people's lives have been obviously still adversely affected by the crisis and the pandemic. But the creation of all of these ideas by government has actually made the lot of people in Norfolk better than it would have been if these initiatives hadn't been taken. Therefore, I find it difficult for people to say, yeah, thanks Gov for working something out that has actually helped us.
Thank you. We only have 10 minutes left for this session, as set out in the Constitution. So would you please be smart, lickety spit. Liz.
Thank you. I have to reiterate the points about our staff. They've been amazing. I'd also like to reiterate and
behalf of Angie as well, that it's the work that's been done by Coastal Partnership East and everything that has resulted in that money coming here. We wouldn't have been considered it without that fantastic work going on. So it's very much a credit to that group of people. But I would like to read something out that's produced as a press release today from the Rural Services Network, 20th of June 2022. Sorry, it's the 20th, not today. Were England's rural communities a distinct region, their need for levelling up would be greater than that of any other part of the country. According to new research published today that finds the government's metrics do not properly account for the pressures facing our small towns and villages, and as a result, it effectively sidelines 12 million people. So I think any funding that came in, yes, it came in everywhere across the country. That still does not level us up and bring what North Norfolk residents both deserve as a rural community and need desperately. So I would not be happy to be writing a letter saying thank you very much. And I really do not like that word gratitude as well.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce, then we'll have Councillor Fredericks, and then I think I'm going to ask Councillor Nixon because we are running out of time.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Having listened to both sides this evening on this argument, it doesn't matter, or maybe it does matter. The fact is that the government did put money through central funds to be used by various authorities. The ever-growing population in this country is never going to be satisfied because the government can never give enough. It isn't gratitude that I'm after. It's a recognition that our central government at least did something. And I don't want any spurs on that phrase. They did something. And at the end of the day, nobody knew how long the COVID illness pandemic was going to last. And nobody really knew how deep and how savage it was going to be. The war in Ukraine is a different thing altogether, and I'm not going to comment on that. But the point is, I find it galling, the fact that, first of all, to use a quote from our leader, that Mrs. Thatcher said, "It's not our money, it's yours." That good lady's been gone some long time. We haven't got her government anymore. You've got a government here now that has given us some money. It may not be enough, but thank God they've given it, because at the end of the day, it ain't gratitude. There should be a recognition, Tim, that it was given. And your attempt to use it through and say the Liberals are doing it is totally immoral.
Thank you. Now, we've only got 6.5 minutes, so
I'll do it in 30 seconds.
go on then.
Furlough support for people that are self-employed. They were begged, the government were begged and pleaded to help. They took their time, and they took their time at people's expense. I was the one that, and many others across this district, were scrabbling for food for people while they parted.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Nixon. Nixon, I beg your pardon, darling.
Yes.
I don't wish to be. Right, off we go.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Listening to the debate, most of the debate, I have to say how easy it is to be wise after events. I'm not sure I can add much more to the merits of this motion, except to present perhaps another perspective on what's essentially a matter of the principles of accurate presentation of information. The underlying issues in this motion are about openness, accountability, honesty, and selflessness. And most of you will hopefully recognize them as 4 of the 7 Nolan principles we should all follow in public life. At a previous full council meeting, this administration proposed a motion extolling the virtues of the Nolan principles and call for more training on them. Well, I remember pointing out that we can have all the possible training on them, but if we don't comply with them in everyday council and public-facing party business, then we will fail them. So that's where the training is the greatest. But for the blatant deception in the party website statements, we wouldn't have this motion today. So this is about compliance with reasonable codes of behaviour. For those who don't agree with Nolan, I expect you will not support this motion. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
This isn't a bear pit. It isn't Parliament. It's just our district council supporting our residents and trying to do the best for everybody. Now, can you please, Chris, would you like to finish? I think you've got about a minute.
Yes, I'll keep it brief, Madam Chairman. I have to say, the response from the leader, I think is churlish to say the least. The government has given vast sums of money to this district, some of which your group is more than happy to run around and claim credit for, when actually it's the governments who've actually done that. And no matter how much money the government gives, it never seems to be quite enough. 400 billion was spent on support for COVID, and so far I think 47 billion has actually been committed to help the cost of living challenges as well. A lot of that money is going to come to this district. So on that basis, I do think that the government has done a lot. It is worthy of support and acknowledgement that it has done so. Okay.
So are you proposing this?
I am happy to oppose.
Who's seconding? Councillor oh yes, you are. You have. Not Councillor Nixon, Councillor Dixon. This is just a straightforward, excuse me, straightforward vote, please. Who's voting for this motion, the opposition motion? Would you please raise your hands if you're voting for? Right, who's against, voting against? And abstentions? Mr. Nolan. Thank you. So this has fallen. The Conservative opposition motion has fallen. Now we go on to number 16, notices of motion, none received, exclusion of press and public, not required, no private business. We finish at 9:06.